RKLB investors, you must watch this before the Q4 earnings call. Right, let's talk. Right, guys, we're all excited here. It's RKLB's Q4 earnings call coming up. I've done a bit of a deep dive on what's happened over the quarter, and I've looked over the Q3 earnings call. I've done a presentation on what to expect in the Q4 earnings call that I'm going to share with you. But first, please smash that subscribe button, because I'm starting to grow up my RKLB community just like I have my Redwire Space community. Right, guys, without further ado, let's jump into this presentation. Before we get into it, you're going to have to forgive me for being a little bald man sitting in the corner of your presentation. But I am going to be cutting out a few words. So sit back tight, have a pen and paper ready, because there are a few things you're going to want to take down in this presentation. And I know the last question I have on this for the analysts, that it's been something that's banging around my head since about Q1 last year. And let me know if you agree with me on it. But before we get into this presentation, I want you to jump down to the comments and let me know, do you think Neutron will be flying by the middle of this year? Let me repeat that. Will Neutron be flying in the summer of this year? If you don't think so, please let me know why. Right, let's get into this. So I'm going to first start with Electron, and I'm going to break it down into 3 sections. So I'm first looking at launch cadence. There was 12 Electron launches by Q3, which was a new annual record. In Q4, we got 4 additional launches, and it gave an overall record of 16 in the year. I want to know how RKLB are improving on customer readiness, the manifest flexibility, and can they add any quick turnaround missions in the future to be able to avoid any disappointing quarters. I know what you're going to say to me. You're going to say they've already realised this revenue, but I just don't like them sitting in the back foot just because of a customer readiness problem. Then I'll break it down to revenue and average selling price. So we know that in Q3 we achieved 55 million in new Electron contracts, with an average selling price being 60% higher than the earlier contracts. For Q4, I would like more insights into any improvements on the average selling price and revenue recognition, especially given the unpredictable nature of launch schedules. Then looking at gross margins. Electron's gross margins did improve last quarter, even with the average selling price variability, and this was driven by the increased production efficiency. I would like to see if they are still expanding their margins, and are they still effectively achieving cost reductions. Then go into the space system business. Space Systems delivered 83.9 million in Q3, which was heavily pushed by the space solar business. Q4 guidance projects a revenue ramp up of Space Systems expected to contribute significantly to 125 to 135 million range. I want to know, did we surpass the guidance? And I need to hear more about the deliveries for the MDA Global Star and the SDA contracts. Then talking about the Mars sample return study. I would like to see how they address this and how they plan on submitting further proposals to ensure selection for it. And then speaking about the backlog and contracts, I would love to hear about any new contract wins, particularly for mega constellations and updates on production capacity. I would also like to see any updates on the Escapade delay and how they're going to address it. I know it was out of their hands, but I just want to hear a little bit more about it. Then going to the big boy. This is where the call is going to get exciting. We're going to talk about Neutron development and launch. So looking at the first launch timeline. So we know they're targeting the first launch for the test flight for mid-25. And if you haven't, let me know, do you think they're going to achieve this? I want to know what progress they've made on the vehicle, the infrastructure development and Launch Complex 3, and any updates to the upgraded engine. The Archimedes it's about 200 kilos lighter, they've said, but I want to know how it's performing now. And I want to know, are they still on track for this range? Then I'm going to talk about the multi-launch agreement. They announced a multi-launch deal for Neutron with a commercial constellation provider, targeting launches starting mid-26. I would like further details on the customer, contract value, and how this fits into the 2026 launch cadence. I also want clarity on how this deal aligns with Neutron's pricing strategy. We're thinking it's going to be around 50 to 55 million, but have they gotten any cheaper on that, or have they stuck to their guns? Then we're going to speak about development milestones. I want specific updates on the first stage qualification tank test, additional engine hot fire tests of this new upgraded Archimedes engine, and the installation of the launch mount at Launch Complex 3. And if there's any delays, how will this impact the mid-25 timeline? Then speaking about something I have banged my head over is financial health. Q4 revenue and margins. So they have guided for Q4 revenue between 125 million and 135 million, with GAAP gross margins of 26 to 28% and a non-GAAP of 32 to 34%. Have these targets been met? I'll be focusing on the mix between launch and space systems and how they're actually growing a backlog. Then talking about operating expenses and cash flow. We know that Q3 saw increased operational expenses, and that was 79.9 million GAAP and 68.7 million non-GAAP. And the cash consumption of 41.9 million free cash flow driven by the development of the Neutron. Q4 guidance projects higher expenses, and that's 84 to 86 million GAAP and 75 to 77 million non-GAAP and cash use. I just really hope that there's not significant delays that may cause further rise in expenses in subsequent quarters. And then speaking about adjusted EBITDA, we know that Q3 adjusted EBITDA loss was 30 million, with a Q4 guidance projecting 27 to 29 million. I want to see progress towards break even though, and I'm going to dial in what they say post Neutron launch. So let's now talk about Rocket Lab's strategic vision and constellation plans. So we're going to call it the Phase 3 strategy. So they do keep teasing about this Phase 3 strategy, which we can assume is their own constellations, but they're withholding any details. I do think we may start to see breadcrumbs though, especially if it's tied to like payload acquisitions or the Neutron's role in enabling high cadence reusable launchers. This could be a really big point in the call, so make sure to just keep your ears open in it. Then let's speak about the leadership changes over the last year. The addition of Frank Klein, who is the new COO, and Ken, I'm going to butcher this name, but it's Possenreed on the board, strengthens operational and financial expertise. I'd like to hear more about who they are and how they're shaping Rocket Lab's scaling efforts across their entire business. Then, what do I want to hear from the analysts themselves? Now, this last question is going to be massive. The first one is how they're scaling production to drive backlog growth, and what are their projections for the growth in backlog. The next one is how are they managing cash flow with the increased Neutron spending, and when do they expect to achieve adjusted EBITDA break-even post-launch? And that's going back to what I've said previously. But this is the one that jumps out to me every day. How do they plan to scale Electron and Neutron launches despite customer readiness delays? And what strategies are in place to mitigate the manifest gaps? Guys, please take that down and see if you get any information in the call. I'll have my ears open, but if anyone knows any way they can do it, please tell me. So now, let me know what you think. Is there any questions you would add to this? Also, are you into investing in Redwire Space? I think they're going to be the next Rocket Lab type of business. And make sure to meet me here if you don't know anything about it.